Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into this intense tale of survival, betrayal, and forbidden bonds in a world where power means everything, make sure you hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end of this one, because nothing in Lyra's world is what it seems, and the choices she makes will change everything. Let's get started. The scent of blood wasn't supposed to be part of her engagement celebration. Lyra Vance stood in the center of the great hall, her spine rigid beneath the weight of silk and expectation, watching the assembled wolves pretend this was anything other than a transaction. The torches cast dancing shadows across faces she'd known her entire life, faces that wouldn't meet her eyes now. Not since her father had announced the alliance 3 months ago. Not since she'd become a bargaining chip instead of a daughter. Alpha Declan Thorne sat at the high table, his massive frame draped in furs that probably cost more than most families earned in a year. He was watching her with the same expression he might give a prize mare, calculating value, assessing potential return. When he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. It never did. "You look pale, little bride." Her cousin Sarah leaned close, breath sharp with wine. "Nervous about the wedding night?" Lyra didn't answer. She'd learned months ago that silence served better than honesty in this place. The Thorne compound was all stone and steel, built to withstand sieges, designed to intimidate. Everything here spoke of power consolidated, rivals crushed, weakness purged. Her father had sold her into this world because the alternative was war, and the Vance pack couldn't afford war. Not with their numbers dwindling, their territory shrinking, their influence fading like morning frost. So here she was, 23 years old, university educated, fluent in 3 languages, and utterly powerless. The musician struck up another song. Declan rose from his seat, and the crowd parted automatically. He moved like violence, barely contained, all coiled muscle and predatory grace. When he extended his hand, Lyra took it because refusing wasn't an option. "You'll learn to smile," he murmured as they began to dance. His grip on her waist was possessive, just shy of painful. "The people need to see unity, strength." "Of course, Alpha." She kept her voice neutral, her face carefully blank. "Your father made the right choice." Declan's thumb traced small circles against her ribs, a gesture that might have seemed tender to observers but felt like a threat. The Vance bloodline was dying. Now it will be absorbed into something greater. You should be grateful. Lyra met his gaze steadily. "I understand my duty." "Do you?" Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe, or anticipation. "We'll see." The song ended. Declan released her with obvious reluctance, already turning to greet a delegation from the Eastern Territories. Lyra seized the opportunity to slip toward the terrace doors, desperate for air that didn't taste like smoke and desperation. Outside, the night was sharp and clear, stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. The compound sprawled below, barracks, training grounds, the high walls that kept the world out, and the pack in. Beyond that, mountains rose in jagged silhouettes, wild territory where the rules were different, and survival meant more than bloodlines. "Running already?" Lyra spun. A man leaned against the stone balustrade, half hidden in shadow. Not Pack. She would have recognized him. He was lean where Declan was broad, all angles and hard edges. Dark hair fell past his collar, unkempt. His clothes were travel-worn, practical. No furs, no silver, nothing that declared status or wealth. "The celebration's inside," she said carefully. "Are you lost?" "Nope." He straightened and she caught the glint of something metallic at his hip, a blade. "Just enjoying the view." "The guards?" "No, I'm here." His smile was brief, sharp. "Invited guest. Cade Rourke, Tracker." The title explained everything and nothing. Trackers operated outside pack politics, selling their skills to whoever paid best. They found people who didn't want to be found, retrieved things others had lost or stolen. They had no loyalty except to the contract, no honor except what they defined themselves. "Then you should be inside," Lyra said, "celebrating with the others. Not much for crowds." Cade tilted his head, studying her with unsettling focus. "You don't look like you're enjoying yourself either, bride-to-be." "My enjoyment isn't relevant." Cold way to go into a marriage. "It's a political alliance. Emotion doesn't factor." "Everything you just said, the tone, the posture, the dead eyes, tells me you're about as happy as a lamb at slaughter." He pushed off the balustrade, moving closer. Question is, why go through with it? Lyra's hand dropped to the small knife hidden in her skirts. Ornamental, supposedly, but she'd sharpened it herself. My choices are my own business. Fair enough. Cade raised his hands in mock surrender. Just making conversation, pretty boring party otherwise. Then leave. Can't. Job's not done yet. He glanced back toward the hall, and something in his expression shifted, became focused, predatory. Speaking of which, you should probably get back inside. Wouldn't want the alpha wondering where his prize went. The words landed like a slap. Lyra turned without responding, but Cade's voice followed her. Careful in there, Miss Vance. Not everyone at this party wants you to make it to the wedding. She paused at the threshold. Is that a threat? Warning. There's a difference. When Lyra glanced back, he was gone, vanished into the shadows like he'd never been there at all. She shook her head, dismissing the encounter. Trackers thrived on drama and mystery. It meant nothing. Inside, the celebration had grown louder, wilder. Someone had started a drinking competition. Sarah was dancing on a table. Declan held court in the corner, surrounded by enforcers and sycophants. He caught Lyra's eye across the room and beckoned. She went. What choice did she have? There you are. Declan's arm snaked around her waist, pulling her close. He smelled like whiskey and sweat. Thought I'd lost you. Just needed air. He nuzzled her neck, and she fought not to flinch. Too delicate for pack life? We'll fix that. Break you in properly. Laughter erupted from his entourage, cruel, knowing laughter that made her skin crawl. But Lyra kept her expression neutral, her body relaxed. Survival meant playing the game until she found a way to flip the board. The rest of the evening blurred. More dancing, more drinking, more speeches about unity and strength and the glorious future of the combined packs. Lyra smiled when required, nodded at appropriate moments, accepted congratulations from wolves who'd known her since childhood, but treated her like a stranger now. By midnight, her face hurt from the fake smiling. Her feet ached. Her soul felt bruised. Tired? Declan whispered in her ear. A little. Go rest. Big day tomorrow. We leave at dawn for the northern compound. Proper wedding in a week. His hand slid lower, possessive. Want you fresh for the journey. Lyra didn't trust the dismissal, but she wasn't stupid enough to refuse. She made her excuses, endured a few final well-wishes, and escaped to her chambers in the guest wing. The room was luxurious by any standard. Thick carpets, heavy furniture, a fire burning in the hearth. It felt like a gilded cage. Lyra locked the door and slumped against it, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of the evening. This was her life now. This pretense, this performance, this slow suffocation of everything she'd hoped to become. She moved to the window, staring out at the mountains. Somewhere beyond those peaks lay freedom, or at least the possibility of it. But escape wasn't an option. Her family would be slaughtered, the alliance would collapse, war would come and blood would flow, and it would all be her fault. So she would stay. She would marry Declan Thorne. She would become what they needed her to be, even if it killed her. Lyra started to turn from the window when movement caught her eye. A shadow detaching from the roofline, dropping to the balcony below with practiced ease. She pressed closer to the glass, heart suddenly racing. Someone was in the compound. Someone who didn't belong. She should call for guards. Should sound the alarm. But something stopped her. Curiosity, maybe, or the reckless part of her that had been buried under duty and obligation for too long. The figure moved with purpose, heading toward the guest wing, toward her room. Lyra's hand found the knife in her skirts. She backed away from the window, scanning for weapons, exits, anything that might help if this went badly. The fire poker. A heavy candlestick. The door was locked, but locks meant nothing to someone determined enough. Seconds stretched. Silence pressed in. Then came the sound of metal scraping metal, someone working the lock. Lyra grabbed the fire poker, positioning herself behind the door. Her training kicked in. Limited though it was, her father had insisted she learn basic combat. Enough to survive a first strike, he'd said. Enough to buy time for help to arrive. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Cade Rourke stepped inside, and before Lyra could react, he had her wrist in an iron grip, twisting until the poker clattered to the floor. His other hand clamped over her mouth, cutting off her scream. Don't, he said quietly. This goes easier if you don't fight. She bit his palm, hard. Cade swore, jerking back, and Lyra lunged for the door. He caught her around the waist, hauling her backward with terrifying strength. She thrashed, clawed, tried every desperate move she could think of, but he was trained for this, anticipated every strike, countered every attempt. "Listen to me," Cade hissed in her ear. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to take you out of this place." "Like hell!" Lyra drove her elbow back, aiming for his ribs. He grunted but didn't release her. Instead, he shifted his grip, forcing her arm behind her back at an angle that sent pain shooting through her shoulder. "You can come quiet, or I can drug you. Your choice, but we're leaving either way. The guards are paid off. No one's coming." He produced a cloth from his pocket, and Lyra caught the sharp, sweet smell of sedatives. "Last chance. Make this easy." She screamed. The cloth pressed against her face, cutting off air, flooding her nose and mouth with chemical sweetness. Lyra fought with everything she had left, kicking, writhing, refusing to breathe, but her body betrayed her. Her lungs demanded oxygen. She gasped, and the drug rushed in. The world tilted. Cade's voice became distant, distorted. "Sorry about this, bride. Nothing personal." Darkness swallowed her whole. When Lyra woke, the first thing she registered was cold. Bone-deep, invasive cold that seeped through her clothes and settled in her joints. The second was pain. Her head throbbed, her shoulder ached, her wrists burned. She was bound. Hands behind her back tied so tightly the rope bit into her skin. Her ankles were similarly restrained. A gag had been shoved into her mouth, tasting of dirt and old leather. Panic flared. She thrashed instinctively, trying to free herself, but the bonds held firm. She was lying on hard-packed earth in near-total darkness. A cave, maybe, or a cellar. Water dripped somewhere nearby. The air smelled like stone and decay. "Awake already?" Cade's voice drifted from the shadows. "Thought you'd be out longer. Must have a high tolerance." Lyra twisted toward the sound. Gradually her eyes adjusted enough to make out his silhouette, sitting against the opposite wall, relaxed as if this were perfectly normal. "Going to remove the gag," he continued. "But if you scream, it goes back on. We're miles from anywhere, so it won't help, and you'll just piss me off. Understand?" She glared at him but didn't move. Cade took that as agreement and crossed the space between them in 3 strides. He crouched, reaching for the gag, and Lyra headbutted him. Pain exploded through her skull. Cade reeled back, cursing, blood streaming from his nose. But he didn't hit her, didn't retaliate. He just wiped his face with his sleeve and let out a rough laugh. "All right, fair, I deserve that." He stood, putting distance between them. "Gag stays on for now." Lyra slumped back against the wall, defeated. Her head was pounding. The drug still fogged her thoughts, making it hard to think clearly. But one thing was obvious. This wasn't a random attack. Cade had planned this, had gotten past the guards, into her room, out of the compound without raising an alarm. Someone had helped him, someone with access and authority. Declan. The realization hit like ice water. This was a setup. Had to be. The Alpha was testing her, or punishing her, or— "Stop spinning wheels in there," Cade said. He'd settled back against the wall, watching her with unnerving calm. "You're not figuring your way out of this tonight. Get some rest. We move at first light." She shook her head violently, trying to communicate fury, defiance, demand for answers. "Yeah, I know. You're pissed, scared, confused." Cade sighed. "Look, I'm not going to hurt you. That's not the job. I get you to a specific location, hand you off, collect my payment. Simple transaction." Lyra made furious sounds behind the gag. "Who hired me? Can't tell you that. Where we're going? Same answer. How long this takes?" He shrugged. "Depends on how cooperative you are. Fight me every step, and it'll be a rough couple of weeks. Play smart, and maybe we both get through this without killing each other." She tried to lunge at him despite the bindings. Cade didn't even flinch. "Spirit. I like that." He stood, gathering supplies from a pack she hadn't noticed. "But save your energy. You're going to need it. Where we're headed, the mountain territory, it doesn't care about bloodlines or politics. It'll kill you just as quick as it would me." He tossed a blanket over her, rough wool that smelled like horses and wood smoke. Then he settled back into his corner, making it clear the conversation was over. Lyra lay in the darkness, mind racing. She had to escape, had to warn someone, get word back to her family. Stop whatever plan was unfolding, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Exhausted, drugged, restrained. So she did the only thing she could. She memorized details, the layout of the cave, the rhythm of Cade's breathing, the weight of the ropes, looking for weak points. Every piece of information was a potential weapon, and Lyra Vance had been underestimated her entire life. That was their first mistake. She would make sure it was their last. Dawn came gray and cheerless. Cade shook her awake without ceremony, removed the gag long enough to let her drink water, then replaced it before she could attempt another scream. He cut the rope on her ankles but kept her wrists bound, then hauled her to her feet. "We've got a long walk ahead," he said, slinging his pack. "I'll carry you if I have to, but you'll be more comfortable on your own feet. Your choice." Lyra glared at him but started walking when he pointed the direction. What else could she do? They emerged from the cave into a landscape of stone and scrub pine. Mountains rose on all sides, peaks lost in low-hanging clouds. The air was thin, sharp with coming winter. No roads, no signs of civilization, just endless wilderness stretching in every direction. Cade set a brutal pace. Lyra struggled to keep up, her legs weak from the drug, her balance compromised by bound hands. She fell twice in the first hour. Both times, Cade hauled her upright without comment and kept moving. By midday, every muscle screamed. Her feet were blistering in the delicate shoes she'd worn to the celebration, completely unsuited for this terrain. She was thirsty, hungry, and furious beyond words. When she stumbled the third time, Cade caught her before she hit the ground. "All right, break." He guided her to a flat rock and removed the gag again. "Drink, eat, 5 minutes." Lyra drank greedily from the canteen he offered, then forced herself to slow down. Dehydration wouldn't help her escape. She needed to stay sharp. "Why?" she finally asked, voice hoarse. "Why what? Why me? What could anyone possibly gain from kidnapping me?" Cade unwrapped dried meat and hard bread, handing her a portion. "That's not my business. I don't ask questions, don't judge motives. Someone pays me to move a package from point A to point B. I move the package. I'm not a package." "Semantics." He bit into his own food. "Eat up. We're losing daylight." "This is insane. When Declan finds out, he won't." Cade's tone was flat, certain. "By the time anyone figures out you're gone, we'll be deep enough in the mountains that tracking us becomes suicide. And even if someone tries, I'm better than whoever they send." Arrogance or fact? Lyra studied him, really looked for the first time since the abduction. He was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe early 30s. Scars marked his hands, one running along his jaw. His eyes were the color of winter storms, cold and assessing. Everything about him spoke of hard living, harder choices. "You don't care," she said slowly, "about any of this, the politics, the pacts, what happens to me after you hand me over." "Nope. What if they plan to kill me? Not my problem." "You're a monster." Cade met her gaze without flinching. "I'm a survivor. There's a difference. I learned a long time ago that caring gets you killed. So I stopped caring. Simple math." "Nothing about this is simple." "Sure it is. You're worth a lot of money to someone. I'm collecting that money. Everything else is just noise." He stood, brushing crumbs from his pants. "Break's over. Let's move." Lyra didn't stand. "What if I refuse?" "Then I carry you. Told you that already." "I'll fight, every step. Make this as difficult as possible." "Your choice." Cade shouldered his pack. "But just so we're clear, you fight, I restrain you harder. You try to run, I tie you to me. You try to hurt me again, I defend myself. I will get you to that location one way or another. The only variable is how much you suffer in the process." It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact, delivered with the same tone he might use to comment on the weather. And somehow that was worse than anger would have been. Lyra stood, started walking, but with every step she was thinking, planning, waiting for the moment when Cade's attention slipped, when his guard dropped, when she could turn this around. Because monsters could be killed. And survivors knew how to adapt. Shut. 3 days into the trek, Lyra made her first real attempt at escape. They'd stopped for the night in a shallow depression between 2 ridges. Barely shelter, but enough to block the worst of the wind. Cade had finally untied her hands to let her eat, though he kept the rope looped around his wrist, ready to restrain her again at the first sign of trouble. She waited until he was focused on building the fire. Then she grabbed a rock and swung it at his head with every ounce of strength she had left. Cade moved, impossibly fast, twisting away so the rock caught his shoulder instead of his skull. He grabbed her wrist, yanking her off balance, then swept her legs out from under her. Lyra hit the ground hard, air rushing from her lungs. Before she could recover, Cade had her pinned, one knee on her chest, both her wrists locked in one of his hands above her head. "Really?" He didn't sound angry, just tired. "That's your plan? Rock to the head?" Lyra bucked, trying to throw him off. He didn't budge. "Listen to me." Cade leaned closer, his face inches from hers. "I get it. You're scared, you're angry, you want to go home. But out here, in this terrain with winter coming, you'll last maybe 2 days alone. Less if the weather turns. So unless you've got a death wish, stop trying to kill me and start thinking survival." "I don't need your advice." "Yeah, you do. Your fancy education didn't teach you how to track game, start a fire without matches, or find water in rock country. You've never spent a night outside pack territory, never had to choose between hunger and safety." His expression was hard, unyielding. "I have. For years. So swallow your pride and pay attention, because keeping you alive until handoff is part of my job." "I'd rather die." "No, you wouldn't." He released her wrists, sitting back on his heels. "You're a fighter. I can see it. You just don't know how to fight out here yet. But you'll learn, or the mountain will teach you the hard way." Lyra sat up slowly, cradling her bruised wrists. "Why do you care if I learn? You said it yourself. I'm cargo." "Damaged cargo pays less." Cade returned to the fire, coaxing flames from the kindling. "And contrary to what you think, I don't enjoy watching people suffer. I do a job. I do it clean. That's it." "How noble." "Never said I was noble, just practical." They ate in silence. The fire crackled, throwing shadows across stone. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, wild, not pack. The sound made Lyra's skin prickle with instinctive response. "They won't come close to fire," Cade said without looking up. "But keep your food secured. Scent carries." "I know that much." "Do you?" He glanced at her, something almost like curiosity in his expression. "What exactly did your pack teach you, besides politics and etiquette?" "History, languages, strategy. Useful for court, not so much for survival." "I know enough." "Sure." Cade stretched out near the fire, using his pack as a pillow. "We'll see." Lyra wanted to argue, but exhaustion was winning. Her body ached. Her feet were raw. And despite everything, the fire was warm, the food had settled her stomach, and sleep was pulling at her with irresistible force. She curled up as far from Cade as the rope would allow, wrapping herself in the rough blanket. Above, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. The same stars she'd watched from her window at the compound, dreaming of freedom. "Careful what you wish for," she thought bitterly. But as sleep claimed her, another thought surfaced, quieter, more dangerous. She was still alive, still fighting, and that meant there was still hope. Even in the middle of nowhere, bound to a stranger who saw her as nothing more than a paycheck, Lyra Vance refused to break. The mountain could try to teach her, Cade could try to control her, but they would both learn the same lesson her father had never quite grasped. She was a Vance, and Vances didn't surrender, not ever. By the 7th day, Lyra had stopped counting bruises. Her body was a map of the mountain's cruelty, scraped knees, blistered palms, muscles that screamed with every movement. The delicate engagement dress had been shredded beyond recognition days ago. Now she wore spare clothes from Cade's pack, rough wool that chafed her skin and smelled like someone else's sweat. Her hair hung in matted tangles. Her face was burned from wind and sun. She looked like exactly what she was, a captive being dragged through hell. But she hadn't broken. Not yet. "Keep up," Cade called back without slowing his pace. He never slowed, not for exhaustion, not for injury, not for the altitude that made every breath feel like drowning. Lyra stumbled over loose scree, caught herself on a boulder and kept moving. Her legs were numb. Her vision blurred at the edges. But stopping meant being carried, and being carried meant admitting defeat. The terrain had grown increasingly hostile. They'd left the foothills behind days ago, climbing into true mountain country where the air was thin and sharp as broken glass. Trees gave way to sparse vegetation clinging to rock faces. Snow dusted the higher peaks, promising worse to come. And through it all, Cade moved like the landscape couldn't touch him. Sure-footed, relentless, utterly at home in this brutal wilderness. "Water," Lyra managed. Her throat was raw. Cade stopped, turning to assess her with that flat, measuring gaze she'd come to hate. "We're a mile from the river. You can wait." "I can't." "You can." He shifted his pack, consulting something she couldn't see. A map, maybe, or compass. "Push through. I've seen pack wolves go 3 days without water during hunts. You're tougher than you think." "I'm not." Her foot caught on a root. She went down hard, palms shredding on rock. Cade was there in seconds, hauling her upright with practiced efficiency. His hands were rough, but not cruel. "Careful. Infection out here is a death sentence." "Then maybe you should slow down." Lyra yanked free, examining her palms. Blood welled from a dozen small cuts. Nothing serious, but it hurt. "We're behind schedule as it is." Cade pulled a small tin from his pack, some kind of salve. "Give me your hands." "I can do it myself." "Can you? With those shaking fingers?" He grabbed her wrist before she could protest, dabbing ointment onto the worst cuts. His touch was impersonal, clinical. "This'll sting." It did. Lyra bit back a gasp, refusing to give him the satisfaction. "There." Cade released her, tucking the tin away. "That'll keep it from festering. Try not to fall again. Try not to walk like you're being chased by demons." Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe. "Fair point, but we're exposed up here. The faster we move, the safer we are." "Safe from what?" Cade's eyes scanned the ridgeline above them, that constant vigilance she'd noticed before. "Other trackers, rival packs, rogues who'd sell you to the highest bidder. Take your pick." Lyra followed his gaze. The mountains looked empty, lifeless. But she was starting to understand that emptiness was an illusion. The wilderness was full of watching eyes, predators waiting for weakness. Why would other trackers care? Because someone put a bounty on you. Cade started walking again. "Word got out. Now every desperate fool with delusions of competence thinks they can snatch you from me." A bounty. Lyra's mind raced. How much? Enough to retire on. He said it casually, like they were discussing weather. "Your valuable property, bride. Your fiancé made sure everyone knows it." "Declan?" Of course. This was his doing, had to be. But why? What did he gain from having her kidnapped? Unless this was the plan all along. Get rid of her before the wedding, blame it on rogues or rivals, consolidate power without the political baggage of an alliance marriage. The thought made her stomach turn. She'd known Declan was ruthless, but this level of calculation, arranging her abduction, putting a price on her head, it spoke to a coldness she hadn't fully grasped. "You're thinking too loud," Cade said. "I can practically hear the gears grinding." "Just trying to figure out who wants me dead." "Probably a long list." He ducked under a low-hanging branch. "Politics is ugly business. People smile while sharpening knives." "Speaking from experience?" "Always." Cade glanced back. "I grew up in pack territory. Watched the game being played. Decided early I wanted no part of it." "So you became a tracker?" "So I became free." His voice held an edge she hadn't heard before, something raw beneath the professional detachment. "No alpha telling me who to be, no pack rules dictating my worth, just me and the contracts I choose to take. Except you took this one. Money's money. Even if it means delivering someone to their death." Cade stopped so abruptly she nearly collided with him. When he turned, his expression was harder than stone. "You think I haven't asked myself that? You think I sleep easy knowing what might happen when I hand you off?" Lyra blinked, startled by the sudden intensity. "I don't," he continued, voice low and tight. "I don't sleep easy at all. But I made a deal, and I keep my deals. That's all I've got out here, my word. Break that and I'm nothing, just another piece of trash the mountain chews up and spits out." For a moment, they stood there in silence. Two people caught in circumstances neither fully controlled, both pretending they had more power than they did. Then Cade turned and kept walking. Lyra followed, but something had shifted. She'd glimpsed the cracks in his armor, seen the person beneath the professional mask. He wasn't quite the heartless mercenary he pretended to be. That realization was both comforting and terrifying, because it meant he was human. and humans could be manipulated, persuaded, turned. She just had to find the right leverage. They reached the river as dusk settled over the valley. It was narrow, fast-moving, fed by snowmelt from the peaks above. The water was so cold it made Lyra's teeth ache when she cupped it to her mouth. "Don't drink too fast," Cade warned. "You'll cramp." She ignored him, gulping greedily until her stomach protested. Then she sat back on her heels, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Cade was already setting up camp, a process that involved minimal effort since they carried almost nothing. A small fire, bedrolls positioned to maximize heat retention, supplies arranged within easy reach. "We'll stay here tonight," he said. "Rest day tomorrow." Lyra's head snapped up. "What? You heard me? We push any harder, you'll collapse. Then I'll have to carry you, which slows us down more than stopping." He didn't look at her while he spoke, focused on the fire. "So we rest." It was the closest thing to kindness he'd offered since the abduction. Lyra didn't trust it. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just logistics." Cade prodded the flames. "We're entering the worst part of the route tomorrow. High passes, exposed terrain. I need you functional." How considerate. "It's practical, nothing more." But his tone suggested otherwise. Maybe he was tired too. Maybe even trackers had limits. Lyra eased herself on to the ground near the fire, every muscle protesting. Her feet were a disaster, blisters on top of blisters, one nail blackened and ready to fall off. She unlaced her boots gingerly, biting back a whimper when fabric stuck to raw skin. "Let me see." Cade moved closer before she could refuse. He examined her feet with the same clinical detachment he'd shown her hands earlier. "This one's infected." "It's fine." "It's not." He retrieved the tin of salve again, along with clean cloth for bandaging. "You get blood poisoning this far from help? You die. Simple as that. Then I guess you'd lose your payday." "I'd lose more than that." He started cleaning the worst wounds, touch surprisingly gentle despite his rough hands. "Contrary to what you think, I don't want you to suffer. Just want me to cooperate." "That too." He wrapped her feet with practiced efficiency, securing the bandages firmly. "There, should hold for a few days. After that, we'll reassess." "Thanks." The word felt strange in her mouth, thanking her captor for basic mercy. Cade shrugged. "Like I said, practical." They ate dried rations in silence. The fire crackled and popped. Overhead stars began to emerge, thousands of them, more than Lyra had ever seen from the compound. The wilderness had its own terrible beauty, she was learning, harsh and unforgiving, but honest in its cruelty. "Can I ask you something?" Lyra said finally. "Depends on the question." "Why do you live like this? Always moving? No home? No connections? Doesn't it get lonely?" Cade was quiet for a long moment. "Loneliness is just another kind of freedom. You get used to it." "I don't believe that." "Then don't." He poked the fire, sending sparks spiraling into darkness. "But I've seen what connections cost. Watched people destroy themselves for pack loyalty, for love, for family. Saw my own parents ripped apart by politics they couldn't control. What happened to them?" "Wrong question. What happened to me is more relevant." His jaw tightened. "I was 12 when our alpha decided my father was plotting against him. No evidence, just paranoia. But that didn't matter. They executed him in the square, made the whole pack watch." Lyra's breath caught. "And your mother?" "Chose to die with him. Honor suicide, they called it." His voice was flat, emotionless, the tone of someone who'd buried their pain so deep it couldn't surface anymore. "I was cast out the next day. Too young to be a real threat, but tainted by association. They dumped me in the borderlands with nothing but the clothes on my back. That's horrible. That's pack law. Efficient, brutal, absolute." Cade met her eyes across the fire. "So yeah, I live like this because I learned early that connections are chains. You care about something, someone uses it against you. You trust the wrong person, you end up dead or worse. Not everyone is like that. No? Name one person in your life who hasn't used you for their own purposes." Lyra opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. Her father had arranged her marriage for political gain. Declan had seen her as a trophy to consolidate power. Her pack had treated her like a bargaining chip. Even Sarah, her own cousin, had been more interested in gossip than genuine friendship. The silence stretched. "Yeah," Cade said quietly. That's what I thought. But you're doing the same thing, Lyra pointed out. Using me for money? At least I'm honest about it. He stood, stretching. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be harder. Lyra watched him settle into his bedroll, turning his back to the fire. Within minutes, his breathing evened out, the sleep of someone who'd learned to rest anywhere, anytime, because survival demanded it. She lay awake much longer, staring at the stars and thinking about chains, about connections that bound and betrayed, about the difference between loneliness and freedom, and about the strange, complicated person who'd stolen her from one prison and dragged her into another. The rest day proved to be anything but restful. Cade woke her at dawn with a simple announcement. We're hunting today. Lyra sat up groggily. What? Supplies are running low. There's game in this valley. Deer, probably some rabbits. We need fresh meat before we hit the high country. He tossed her a crude spear he'd fashioned from a branch and his knife. You're going to help. I don't know how to hunt. Then you'll learn. Cade shouldered a makeshift bow. When had he made that? And started walking. Stay quiet. Follow my lead. Don't scare off the prey. Lyra scrambled to follow, still half asleep. The morning air was crisp, cold enough to turn her breath to fog. Her bandaged feet protested every step, but the pain was duller today. The salve was working. They moved through the forest in silence. Cade's whole demeanor changed when he was tracking, became focused, predatory, utterly absorbed in reading signs Lyra couldn't even see. He would pause to examine broken twigs, disturbed earth, marks on tree bark. Sometimes he'd crouch and just listen, head tilted, eyes closed. It was mesmerizing to watch. This was what he'd been born to do, what he'd honed through years of brutal practice. Out here, he wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. After an hour, Cade raised a hand in warning. Lyra froze. He pointed ahead, where a small clearing opened between the trees. A deer grazed there, young but healthy. It hadn't detected them yet. Cade knocked an arrow with agonizing slowness, drew the bow, aimed. The deer's head snapped up. It had caught their scent. Cade loosed the arrow. It flew true, catching the animal just behind the shoulder. The deer bolted, crashing through underbrush, but it wouldn't get far. That was a killing shot. Come on. Cade was already moving. We need to find it before scavengers do. They tracked the wounded deer for 20 minutes, following the blood trail deeper into the forest. Finally, they found it collapsed in a ravine, sides heaving, eyes rolling with fear and pain. Finish it, Cade said, handing Lyra the spear. What? No, I can't. Yes, you can. The arrow did most of the work. Now you end its suffering. Lyra stared at the dying animal, horror rising in her throat. I've never killed anything. Then today's the day you learn. Cade's voice was hard. This is what survival looks like. Not pretty speeches or political maneuvering, blood and death and doing what needs to be done. You do it. I brought it down. You finish it. That's how this works. This is insane. This is reality. Cade's patience finally snapped. You think you're going to make it out here with your hands clean? You think the mountain cares about your moral comfort? It doesn't. So either you put that animal out of its misery or you watch it suffer while you wrestle with your conscience. Lyra looked at the deer. It was dying anyway. Cade was right. Prolonging this was cruelty. She gripped the spear with shaking hands, approached slowly. The deer thrashed weakly, too injured to run. Quick and clean, Cade instructed, behind the shoulder, angled toward the heart. Lyra positioned the spear, closed her eyes. Eyes open, Cade said sharply. You owe it that much. See what you're doing. She opened her eyes, met the deer's gaze, dark, fading, already halfway gone. Then she drove the spear home. The deer shuddered once and went still. Lyra stumbled backward, dropping the spear, bile rising in her throat. She made it 3 steps before she was violently sick, heaving up what little food she'd eaten. Cade said nothing, just started field dressing the carcass with quick, efficient movements. When Lyra finally composed herself enough to look, he had the deer gutted and was portioning the meat. Why? She asked hoarsely. Why make me do that? Because you needed to understand. Cade didn't look up from his work. You've spent your whole life insulated from consequences. Someone else always did the hard things, the dirty things. But out here, there's no one else. Just you and your choices. I hate you. Noted. He wrapped meat in oiled cloth. But you'll thank me later. When you understand what you're capable of, when you stop seeing yourself as helpless. Lyra wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Her hands were shaking. There was blood under her fingernails. She felt transformed, contaminated by what she'd just done. And underneath the horror, something else stirred. Something that whispered she was still alive, still fighting, still refusing to break. Maybe that was Cade's point. That night, they cooked fresh venison over the fire. Lyra ate mechanically, tasting nothing. The act of killing had stripped away some protective layers she hadn't known she possessed, leaving her raw and exposed. First kill is always hard, Cade said quietly. Gets easier. I don't want it to get easier. You say that now. He turned the meat, fat, sizzling into the flames. But survival changes you, makes you harder. Eventually, you don't even recognize the person you used to be. Is that what happened to you? Yeah. No hesitation. The kid who watched his parents die. He's gone. I buried him in the borderlands along with every other weakness I couldn't afford to keep. That's sad. That's honest. Cade pulled the meat from the fire, dividing it between them. And honesty is all I've got left. They ate in silence. The fire burned low. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled, wild and free and utterly alone. Lyra understood that sound now. Understood the isolation, the constant vigilance, the way survival became its own purpose when everything else was stripped away. We're the same, she said suddenly. You and me. Cade raised an eyebrow. How do you figure? We're both prisoners. You're just better at pretending otherwise. She gestured at the wilderness around them. You call this freedom, but you're as trapped as I am. By your contracts, your reputation, your need to prove you don't need anyone. That's a stretch. Is it? When's the last time you chose something because you wanted it, not because someone paid you or because survival demanded it? Cade's jaw tightened. Careful, bride. You're getting philosophical on me. I'm getting honest. You wanted honesty, right? Lyra leaned forward. You're so convinced that caring is weakness. But maybe it's the other way around. Maybe running from every connection, every feeling, every chance at something real, maybe that's the real weakness. Or maybe I've just learned from experience. Cade's voice went cold. I've watched caring people destroy themselves, seen love turn into leverage, loyalty twisted into obligation. I'm done being that vulnerable. So you're just going to spend the rest of your life alone? Taking contracts, moving from place to place, never building anything that lasts? Better than building something just to watch it burn. That's fear talking. That's wisdom talking. Cade stood abruptly. And this conversation is over. He stalked off into the darkness, leaving Lyra alone by the fire. She'd struck a nerve, hit something he didn't want to examine. Good. Let him be uncomfortable for once. But as she settled into her bedroll later, another thought nagged at her. She'd spent the entire conversation analyzing Cade, but what about herself? What was she running from? What connections had she been too afraid to build, too proud to maintain? The questions followed her into uneasy sleep. The next 3 days were the hardest yet. They climbed into true alpine territory where the air was thin enough to make every breath a struggle. Snow covered the ground in patches, growing thicker as they ascended. The temperature dropped viciously at night, hovering near freezing even during the day. Lyra's body adapted slowly. The blisters hardened into calluses. Her lungs learned to extract oxygen from thin air. Her muscles stopped screaming and just settled into a constant, dull ache. But the terrain grew more treacherous. They traversed narrow ledges where one misstep meant a fatal fall. Crossed streams swollen with snowmelt, water so cold it burned like fire. Climbed scree slopes that shifted underfoot, threatening avalanche with every step. Cade remained vigilant, but even he couldn't control the mountain. On the 4th day of the climb, disaster struck. They were navigating a steep switchback when the ground gave way beneath Lyra's feet. She dropped, scrabbling for purchase, fingers finding only loose rock. For one terrible second, she was falling. Then Cade's hand locked around her wrist. He'd thrown himself flat on the stable section of trail, anchoring his weight as he held her suspended over a 50-foot drop. His face was tight with effort, muscles straining. "Climb!" he shouted. Lyra kicked against the rock face, trying to find footing. Her boots slipped on loose stone. The drop yawned beneath her, promising broken bones and slow death. I can't. Yes, you can. Cade's grip tightened. Use your legs. Push up. Now. She tried again, found a tiny ledge for her toe. Pushed. Cade hauled backward, and suddenly she was scrambling over the edge, collapsing onto solid ground. For a moment, they both just lay there, breathing hard. You okay? Cade asked finally. Yeah, thanks. Lyra's hands were shaking. You saved my life. Part of the job. But he didn't move away, just stayed there, close enough that she could feel his warmth against the cold. If I'd fallen... You didn't. Focus on that. Cade sat up slowly, checking the trail ahead. But we need to be more careful. The mountain doesn't give second chances. Lyra nodded, still processing how close she'd come to dying, and how Cade, her captor, her enemy, had risked himself without hesitation to save her. The lines kept blurring. Captor and protector, enemy and ally. Nothing was simple anymore. They continued climbing, but something had shifted between them. The hostility felt less sharp, the silences less antagonistic. That night, Lyra woke to find Cade awake, staring into the dying fire. Can't sleep? She asked quietly. Never sleep well in the mountains. He didn't look at her. Too many things that can go wrong. Is it always like this? The hypervigilance? Yeah, comes with the territory. Cade poked the embers. You get used to it. Or you don't, and you die. Sounds exhausting. It is. For once he sounded tired, genuinely bone-deep tired. But it's all I know. Lyra sat up, pulling her blanket around her shoulders against the cold. Earlier, when I fell, you could have let go, collected the bounty some other way. Damaged goods pay less. We covered this. I don't think that's the real reason. Cade finally looked at her. In the firelight, his eyes were shadowed, unreadable. What do you want me to say? That I care what happens to you? That dragging you through this mountain is keeping me up at night? Is it? Yeah. The admission came out harsh, almost angry. Yeah, it is. Happy now? Lyra wasn't sure how to respond to that. The wall he'd built around himself, the professional detachment, the calculated coldness. It was cracking. And underneath was someone far more complicated than she'd anticipated. I don't understand you, she said finally. That makes two of us. Cade laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm not supposed to care. I've built my whole life around not caring, and then you... He cut himself off, jaw clenching. Then I what? Nothing. Forget it. He stood abruptly. Get some rest. We move at first light. But he didn't walk away this time. Just stood there, silhouetted against the stars, shoulders tight with tension. Lyra lay back down, but sleep was impossible now. Her mind was racing, trying to parse what had just happened. The admission that he cared, however reluctantly, changed everything. Because if Cade cared, then he was vulnerable. And vulnerable people could be turned, persuaded, convinced to change course. But even as she thought it, something in her recoiled. Was she really considering manipulating him? Using his emerging conscience against him? When had she become someone who thought that way? The mountain was changing her, just like Cade had warned, making her harder, colder, more willing to do whatever survival demanded. She wasn't sure if that was strength or corruption. Maybe it was both. On the 8th day, they crested the final pass. The view was breathtaking, mountains stretching endlessly in every direction, peaks white with snow, valleys dark with forest. This was true wilderness, unmarked by civilization, untouched by pack politics. There, Cade said, pointing to a distant valley. That's where we're headed. 2 more days if the weather holds. Lyra stared at the destination, dread settling in her stomach. 2 more days until she was handed off to whoever had paid for her abduction. 2 more days until she found out if she was being rescued or executed. What happens when we get there? She asked. I collect my payment. You meet your buyer. Cade's voice was carefully neutral. After that, it's not my business. You keep saying that like repetition makes it true. It is true. Then why do you look like you're heading to your own execution? Cade's hands tightened on his pack straps. We should keep moving. Storm's coming. He was right. Dark clouds were building on the horizon, moving fast. They descended into the valley at a punishing pace, racing the weather. But the storm caught them anyway, halfway down the slope. The wind hit first, howling through the rocks with enough force to knock them sideways. Then came the snow. Not gentle flakes, but stinging ice pellets that felt like needles on exposed skin. "Cave!" Cade shouted over the wind. "There!" He pointed to a dark opening in the rock face. They scrambled toward it, fighting the wind every step. By the time they tumbled inside, Lyra was shaking with cold, her fingers numb, her face raw. The cave was shallow but dry, sheltered from the worst of the storm. Cade immediately started gathering deadfall from near the entrance, building a fire with hands that shook from cold. "Strip," he ordered. "What?" "Your clothes are wet. You'll freeze. Strip now. Wrap in the dry blanket." He wasn't looking at her, focused entirely on coaxing flames from damp wood. "This isn't negotiable." Lyra's hands fumbled with frozen buttons. Her clothes were indeed soaked through, clinging to her skin like ice. She peeled them off with numb fingers, wrapping herself in the blanket Cade tossed her way. He did the same, matter-of-factly stripping to dry layers and draping his wet clothes near the fire. If he noticed her watching, he didn't comment. The fire finally caught, throwing blessed heat into the small space. They huddled near it, sharing body warmth without discussion because survival trumped propriety. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. "We might be stuck here a while," Cade said finally. "Mountain storms can last days." "Days?" Lyra's heart sank. "But you said—" "I said 2 days if the weather held." "It didn't." He fed more wood to the fire. "So we wait. Nothing else we can do." "Your buyer won't be happy about the delay. They'll deal with it." Cade's jaw was tight. "I'm not risking both our lives to meet an arbitrary deadline." The admission hung in the air. Both our lives. Not just the cargo. Both of them. "Thank you," Lyra said quietly. "For what?" "For not being willing to kill me for punctuality." Cade made a rough sound that might have been laughter. "Yeah, well, standards have to exist somewhere." They lapsed into silence again. The fire crackled. The storm howled. And in that small cave, trapped between the mountain's fury and an uncertain future, something shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. Lyra felt it like a change in air pressure. Cade must have too, because his shoulders tensed and he looked away, jaw working. "This is a bad idea," he muttered. "What is?" "This. Us. Whatever the hell is happening here." He gestured vaguely between them. "I don't do connections. Remember? Don't do caring." "I know." "Then why—" He cut himself off, frustration evident in every line of his body. "You're supposed to be cargo. A job. That's it." "But I'm not anymore." Lyra pulled the blanket tighter. "Am I?" Cade didn't answer, but the look in his eyes, conflicted, almost desperate, said everything. The storm outside intensified, wind shrieking through cracks in the rock. And inside the cave, 2 people who should have been enemies sat in firelight, both terrified of the thing growing between them. Because connection meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant weapons that could be used against you. And in this brutal world, weapons were the difference between survival and destruction. But Lyra was learning something the mountain had been trying to teach her all along. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was survive alone. Sometimes the real weakness wasn't caring. It was running from the possibility that someone might care back. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days trapped in a cave barely large enough for 2 people, with nothing but each other and the howling wind outside. 3 days of rationed food, melted snow for water, and conversations that peeled back layers neither of them wanted exposed. By the second day, Lyra knew things about Cade she suspected he'd never told another living soul. How he'd survived those first months in the borderlands by stealing from travelers and sleeping in trees to avoid predators. How he'd taught himself to track by following wolves, learning their patterns, mimicking their patience. How he'd taken his first contract at 16, retrieval of a stolen heirloom, and discovered he had a talent for finding things people wanted to stay lost. "Turned out I was good at it," Cade said, feeding another stick to the fire. "Really good. Word spread. Contracts got bigger, payment got better. By 20, I had a reputation. By 25, I could pick and choose jobs." "So why take this one, Mike?" Lyra asked. They'd been circling this question for days, and she finally had him cornered with nowhere to escape. Cade was quiet for a long moment. The money was obscene, enough to disappear completely, set myself up somewhere the packs would never find me. You're lying. His head snapped up. Excuse me? You heard me. That's not the real reason. Lyra shifted closer, studying his face in the firelight. You could have retired years ago if that's what you wanted, but you keep taking contracts, keep moving. Why? Because stopping means thinking. Thinking means remembering, and I'd rather keep moving than deal with that. His voice was rough, defensive. Remembering what? Everything I've lost. Everyone I've failed. Cade looked away. My parents. The pack I belonged to before politics destroyed it. The few people stupid enough to care about me who ended up dead because of it. That's not your fault, isn't it? I'm the common denominator. I'm the one who survives while everyone else burns. He laughed, bitter and sharp. Maybe that tracker who called me a curse was right. Maybe I'm poison to anyone dumb enough to get close. Lyra felt something crack open in her chest. This was the truth beneath all his walls. Not indifference, but guilt so massive he couldn't face it. So he ran, kept running, built a life around never staying still long enough for the past to catch up. You saved my life, she said quietly. Twice now. That doesn't sound like poison to me. Give it time. Stop that. Lyra's voice sharpened. Stop hiding behind cynicism like it's armor. You care. I've seen it. You're just too scared to admit it because admitting it means being vulnerable again. Damn right I'm scared. Cade's eyes blazed. You know what vulnerability gets you out here? Dead, used, destroyed. I've watched it happen over and over. So your solution is to never feel anything? To turn yourself into a machine? My solution is to survive. That's it. That's all I've got. That's not surviving. That's just existing. Lyra leaned forward. There's a difference. The silence that followed was charged, dangerous. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, something else entirely was building, tension that had nothing to do with the storm. Cade's jaw worked. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? I've spent my whole life in a different kind of prison. Pretty cage, same result. I know what it's like to be so afraid of getting hurt that you stop feeling altogether. Her voice dropped. But I'm learning that maybe being afraid of living is worse than being afraid of dying. Lyra, why did you really take this contract, Cade? He stared at her, something raw and desperate in his expression. Because I thought it would be easy. Snatch a spoiled pack princess, deliver her to the buyer, collect the money. Clean, simple, no complications. And then you fought back, kept fighting, refused to break even when any sane person would have given up. His voice went rough. And I realized you weren't what I expected, weren't who they said you were. Who did they say I was? Weak, pampered, useless outside pack protection. Cade laughed harshly. They were wrong. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. Just took you being dragged through hell to figure it out. The words hit her like a physical blow. No one had ever called her strong. Beautiful, yes. Well-bred? Certainly. Politically valuable, absolutely. But strong? That wasn't a word her world used for women like her. I'm not. You are. Cade's intensity pinned her in place. You killed when you had to, climbed when I thought you'd collapse, survived terrain that breaks grown warriors, and you did it all while hating me, which makes it even more impressive. I don't hate you. The admission slipped out before Lyra could stop it. Cade went very still. You should. I know, doesn't change anything. The distance between them felt suddenly, impossibly small. Lyra could see every detail of his face, the scar along his jaw, the shadows under his eyes, the way his chest rose and fell with careful breaths. This is a bad idea, Cade said again, but he didn't move away. You keep saying that. Because it's true. You're cargo. I'm the tracker. When we reach that valley, I hand you over and walk away. That's the job. What if you didn't? The question hung between them like a lit fuse. Cade's expression shuddered. Don't do this. Do what? Ask you to choose something other than money for once in your life? You don't understand. I made a deal. My word is all I have. Break it, and I'm nothing. Just another failed tracker no one will hire. So you're going to deliver me to people who might kill me just to protect your reputation? I don't know what they'll do to you. The words came out harsh, almost desperate. The contract didn't specify. Could be ransom, could be leverage, could be execution, Lyra finished. We both know it. You've known from the start. Cade's hands clenched. I can't think about that. Why not? Because if I do, I won't be able to go through with it. He stood abruptly, pacing the small cave like a caged animal. And I have to. There's no other option. I made the deal before I knew. He cut himself off. Before you knew what? Before I knew it would matter. The admission came out broken. Before I knew you would matter. Lyra's breath caught. There it was. The truth he'd been fighting for days. He cared. More than he wanted to, more than was safe, enough to unravel everything he'd built. Then don't hand me over, she said. Choose differently. I can't. Yes, you can. People change their minds every day. Not people like me. I'm bound by contract magic. You break the deal, you pay the price. Literally. Blood magic, old pack law, unbreakable. He showed her his wrist, where a dark mark coiled beneath the skin. The moment I took payment, this activated. I deliver you to the location, or I die. Simple as that. Lyra stared at the mark, horror rising in her throat. You're cursed? Bound? Different term, same result. Cade's smile was bleak. The buyer didn't trust that I wouldn't develop a conscience. Smart of them. Who's the buyer? Don't know. Contract came through intermediaries. Anonymous payment, anonymous instructions. He sat back down heavily. All I have is a location and a deadline. Then we run. Disappear. You said yourself the mountains are big enough to hide in. The curse finds me wherever I go. Distance doesn't matter. I miss the deadline, the magic activates, and I die screaming. Cade's voice was flat. I've seen it happen to other trackers who tried to break their bonds. Not pretty. There has to be another way. There isn't. Trust me. I've been looking for one since day 3 of this nightmare. He rubbed his face tiredly. This is my fault. I took the contract, accepted the binding, set all of this in motion. Now I have to see it through. Even if it means my death? I don't know. The words came out ragged. I don't know what happens to you. Maybe they just want to use you as leverage against Thorn. Maybe it's ransom. Maybe I'm a loose end they're tying off. Lyra's voice was steady, despite the fear churning in her gut. You know that's the most likely scenario. Declan arranged this. He gets me out of the way, blames it on rogues, consolidates power without the messy politics of an alliance marriage. Cade didn't argue, couldn't, because she was right, and they both knew it. I'm sorry, he said finally, quietly. For all of it. Sorry doesn't change anything. I know. The fire burned low. Outside, the storm was finally weakening, wind dropping to occasional gusts. By morning, they'd be able to move again. One more day to the valley. One more day before Cade handed her over and walked away. One more day to live. Lyra lay down, wrapping herself in the blanket. But sleep wouldn't come. Her mind raced, cycling through options, searching for escape routes that didn't exist. She could run. But where? The mountains would kill her faster than any assassin. She could fight. But Cade was twice her size, trained for combat, and bound by magic to complete his contract. She could beg. But pride was all she had left, and she wouldn't surrender that. So what then? The answer, when it came, was so simple she almost laughed. If there was no way to escape the trap, you changed the rules of the game entirely. Cade, she said into the darkness. Yeah? What happens if I'm dead before you reach the handoff point? Silence. Then, what? The contract specifies delivery, but what if there's nothing to deliver? Does the binding release you? Lyra, what are you? Answer the question. More silence. She could practically hear him thinking, working through the implications. Technically, yes, he said slowly. If the cargo is destroyed before delivery through no fault of the tracker, the contract is considered fulfilled at partial value. The binding would release. And you'd live. This is insane. You're talking about killing yourself to save me from a curse I brought on myself. I'm talking about taking control of my own fate. Lyra sat up, finding him in the darkness. They want me dead? Fine. But it happens on my terms, not theirs. And maybe, just maybe, it saves someone who doesn't deserve to die for trying to survive. No. Cade's voice was hard. Absolutely not. I won't let you. You don't get a vote. It's my life, my choice. Like hell it is. You think I can live with that? Watch you die and just walk away? You'd be alive to live with it. That's more than you'd get otherwise. Lyra's throat was tight. At least this way, something good comes from all this mess. There's nothing good about you dying. Maybe not, but there's something right about it. She could see the shape of him now, eyes adjusted to darkness. You saved my life twice. Let me return the favor. By throwing yours away, that's not a favor. That's... His voice broke. That's the worst thing you could possibly do to me. Why? You'll be free. Isn't that what you want? Not like this. Never like this. Cade moved closer, and she could feel the heat of him, the barely controlled desperation. You don't get to sacrifice yourself for me. I'm not worth it. That's not your decision to make. The hell it isn't. I'm the one who dragged you into this. I'm the one who should pay the price. You already are paying it. Every day. Killing yourself slowly by refusing to connect, to feel, to be anything other than a tool. Lyra reached out, found his hand in the darkness. Let me do this. Let me mean something. His fingers tightened around hers. You already mean something. To me. That's the problem. The admission hung between them, raw, honest, terrifying. Then remember me, Lyra whispered. When it's over, remember that someone thought you were worth saving. Lyra. Whatever he was going to say was cut off by a sound from outside. Voices. Multiple voices growing closer. Cade went rigid. We've got company. They scrambled to their feet. Cade moved to the cave entrance, peering out into the gray dawn. The storm had passed, leaving everything covered in fresh snow. And trudging through that snow, maybe 100 yards away, were 5 figures, armed, moving with purpose. Other trackers, Cade breathed. Bounty hunters. Must have tracked us through the storm. Can we run? Not without them seeing us, and in this snow they'd track us easily. His hand went to his knife. 5 against 1. Bad odds. 5 against 2, Lyra corrected, grabbing the makeshift spear. Cade looked at her. You can't. Watch me. Her heart was hammering, but her voice was steady. You taught me to survive. Time to prove I learned. The voices grew louder. They were close enough now that Lyra could make out words. Has to be here. Tracks lead straight to this cave. You sure it's Rourke? Who else would be dumb enough to take this route in winter? Doesn't matter. We get the girl, we split the bounty. Dead or alive, the contract said. Dead or alive. So much for Lyra's hope that this was about ransom. Cade's expression went hard. Stay behind me. When I move, you run. Head south along the ridgeline. There's a settlement 3 days from here. Tell them, I'm not leaving you. This isn't a negotiation. You can still survive this. I can buy you time, but you have to run. No. Lyra planted her feet. We fight together or we die together. Your choice. For a moment, Cade looked like he wanted to argue. Then something in his expression shifted. Acceptance, maybe, or just recognition that arguing was pointless. Together, then. He pulled a second knife from his boot, handed it to her. Stay close. Watch your back. And if I go down, you run. Deal? Deal. Lyra took the knife, testing its weight. It felt wrong in her hand, too light, too small. But it was a weapon. It would have to be enough. The bounty hunters were almost at the cave entrance now. Cade positioned himself in front, Lyra slightly behind and to the side. Defensive position, meant to control the narrow opening. Rourke, one of the hunters called. We know you're in there. Send out the girl, and we'll let you walk away. You've got 30 seconds. Cade didn't respond, just adjusted his grip on the knife, coiling like a spring. 20 seconds. Lyra's mouth was dry. Her hands shook. This was nothing like killing the deer. This was people, trained fighters who wanted her dead. 10 seconds. Cade glanced back at her. Remember, stay close. Final warning, Rourke. Then all hell broke loose. The first hunter rushed the entrance, and Cade met him with brutal efficiency. The knife flashed, finding the gap in the man's guard. He went down hard, blood spreading across snow. The others came fast after that. No more talk, no more warnings, just violence. Cade moved like something wild, all controlled fury and lethal precision. He'd been holding back during their trek, Lyra realized, hiding just how dangerous he really was. Now, faced with real threats, he became something else entirely. But 5 against 1 was still bad odds. He couldn't cover every angle. A hunter broke through, lunging for Lyra. She reacted on instinct, bringing up the knife in a clumsy block. The hunter's blade scraped past hers, and suddenly he was on top of her, bearing her to the ground. "Got her!" he shouted. Lyra drove her knife up blindly, felt resistance, felt something warm and wet on her hands. The hunter made a choking sound and rolled off her. She scrambled to her feet, staring at her hands. Blood. So much blood. "Lyra, move!" Cade's shout snapped her out of it. She dove aside just as another hunter's blade whistled through where her head had been. Cade was there instantly, his knife finding the attacker's ribs. 2 down, 3 left. But Cade was bleeding now, a cut on his shoulder, another on his thigh. He was slowing. The remaining hunters circled, coordinating. They'd learned from watching their companions die. Now they were being smart, careful. "Last chance," the leader said. "Give us the girl, walk away. This doesn't have to end with you dead." "Yeah, it does." Cade's voice was rough. "Because I'm not handing her over." "Loyalty to cargo? That's new for you, Rourke. People change. Not that much. Not you." The leader gestured and the other 2 started to flank. "But fine. Your funeral." They moved in concert, 3 different angles. Cade couldn't block them all. He managed to intercept 2, but the third got through, and Lyra was there. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. Just stepped into the hunter's path and drove her knife forward with everything she had. The hunter twisted, and the blade skittered off his leather armor. But it bought Cade the second he needed. His knife found the hunter's throat. 3 down, 2 left. The leader's expression finally showed something other than confidence. Fear, maybe, or respect. "You're better than the stories say," he admitted. "But we've still got numbers." "Then come find out if it's enough," Cade growled. The leader and his companion exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them. Then they charged together, coordinated, professional. Cade met them head on. Steel rang against steel. Bodies crashed and grappled. Lyra tried to help, but the fight was too fast, too brutal. She'd only get in the way. Then Cade went down. The leader's blade had found his side, cutting deep. He stumbled, and the other hunter moved in for the kill. Lyra screamed, threw herself forward. Her knife, the one Cade had given her, found the hunter's back. Not a fatal blow, but enough to make him turn. His fist caught her across the face. Stars exploded. She tasted blood. Then Cade was up again, moving despite the wound, and his knife took the hunter in the kidney. The man dropped without a sound. Just the leader left now. He backed toward the cave entrance, reassessing. 4 of his crew were dead or dying. The odds had changed. "This isn't over," he said. "There are more coming. The bounty's too good. Every tracker within 100 miles is hunting her." "Let them come," Cade rasped. Blood soaked his shirt. "You'll die protecting cargo. Is she really worth it?" Cade's answer was immediate, certain. "Yeah, she is." The leader shook his head. "Then you're a fool." He turned and ran, disappearing into the snow. Silence crashed down. Lyra could hear her own breathing, harsh and ragged. Could hear Cade's labored gasps. Then he collapsed. "Cade!" She was at his side instantly, pressing hands against the wound in his side. Blood welled between her fingers. Too much blood. "I'm okay," he managed. "You're bleeding out, you idiot!" "Yeah, well," his smile was pained. "Happens sometimes. Stop talking. Save your strength." Lyra looked around wildly for supplies, bandages, anything. "I need to stop the bleeding." "Lyra." His hand found hers. "Listen. No. We're not doing this. You're going to be fine. I'll figure something out." "The binding." Cade's voice was getting weaker. "If I die before delivery, it releases. You'll be free." "I don't care about the binding." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I care about you not dying." "Funny, me too." He coughed and blood flecked his lips. "But I don't think I get a vote." "Then I'll make the choice for both of us." Lyra's hands were shaking as she tore strips from her shirt, packing the wound. "You're not dying. I won't let you." "Stubborn. You taught me that." "Guess I did." His eyes were starting to lose focus. Lyra, listen. There's a cache 3 miles south. Supplies, money. Password is Starlight. Take it. Get to the settlement. They'll help. I'm not leaving you. Have to. Those hunters. More coming. You heard him. Cade's breathing was getting shallower. Please. Run. Live. Not without you. Then we're both dead. His hand tightened on hers, weak but insistent. Don't let this be for nothing. Lyra looked at him, at this man who'd kidnapped her, dragged her through hell, saved her life, and somehow become the only person in the world she trusted completely. And she made a choice. You're right, she said. We can't both stay here. So I'm getting help, but you... She leaned close, voice fierce. You stay alive. However long it takes me to get back, you stay alive. Understand? Cade's eyes found hers. Lyra, promise me. I promise. It was a lie. They both knew it, but she didn't care. Lyra pressed a hard, desperate kiss to his forehead. Then she stood, grabbed the pack with supplies, and ran. The settlement was 3 days away. She'd make it in 2 if it killed her. But as she ran through the snow, one thought kept echoing in her mind. She'd killed 3 people today, survived an ambush, made a choice to save someone over herself. Somewhere between the compound and this mountain, between captive and survivor, Lyra Vance had stopped being the person they'd tried to make her. She'd become someone new, someone dangerous, someone who wouldn't stop fighting until every person responsible for this nightmare paid the price. Starting with Alpha Declan Thorne, Lyra made it to the settlement in 36 hours. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out, then walked until she could run again. She navigated by stars and instinct, following the ridgeline south like Cade had instructed. When exhaustion finally pulled her under, she slept in brief, fitful bursts, an hour here, 30 minutes there. Never enough to feel rested, but just enough to keep moving. The settlement was smaller than she'd imagined. Maybe 20 buildings clustered in a protected valley, smoke rising from chimneys. A trading post from the looks of it. Neutral territory where packs and rogues alike could resupply without bloodshed. Lyra stumbled into the main square just as the sun was setting. People stared. She must have looked like death itself. Covered in blood. Half her clothes torn away for bandages, face gaunt with exhaustion and fear. I need help, she managed before her knees buckled. Strong hands caught her. A woman's voice, sharp with authority. Get the healer, now. There's someone... Lyra tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. Cave. 3 miles north. He's dying. Please. Calm down. We'll handle it. The woman guided her toward a building. First, we take care of you. No, you don't understand. He doesn't have time, and you'll be no good to him dead. The woman's tone left no room for argument. 5 minutes. Let us assess, then we'll send a team. Those 5 minutes felt like hours. The healer, an older man with gentle hands and sharp eyes, examined her quickly, efficiently. Minor cuts, severe exhaustion, early stages of frostbite on her fingers. Nothing life-threatening. You're lucky, he said. Another day out there, and we'd be having a different conversation. The man in the cave. Marcus is gathering a team now, best trackers in the settlement. They'll find him. The healer pressed a cup of something hot into her hands. Drink. You need warmth. Lyra drank mechanically, barely tasting it. Her mind was back in that cave, watching Cade's blood stain the snow, seeing his eyes lose focus, hearing his labored breathing. She'd promised to come back. She'd promised. The woman from earlier, Marcus apparently, returned with 4 others. All armed, all moving with the easy competence of people who knew the mountains intimately. Tell me exactly where, Marcus said. Lyra described the location as best she could. The pass they'd crossed, the valley beyond, the cave entrance facing east. Marcus nodded, marking a map. We know the area. 3 hours there, maybe 4 back if we're carrying injured. She looked at Lyra. This man? He your mate? Family? He's... Lyra stopped. What was Cade to her? Captor turned protector? Enemy turned ally? The person who'd shown her what she was capable of becoming? He's important. That's all that matters. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Fair enough. We leave in 10 minutes. You're staying here. Like hell I am. You can barely stand. You'd slow us down, and speed is what he needs. Marcus's voice gentled slightly. Trust us. We do this for a living. Every instinct screamed at Lyra to argue, to fight, to go with them. But Marcus was right. In her current state, she'd be a liability. Bring him back, she said quietly. Please. We'll do our best. Marcus signaled to her team. Move out. They disappeared into the gathering darkness, moving fast and sure. Lyra watched until they vanished from sight, then let the healer guide her to a small room with a bed. Rest, he ordered. I'll wake you when they return. I can't. You can, and you will. Your body needs recovery, or you'll be useless when he gets back. The healer's expression softened. He's got the best chance with Marcus's team. Now give them time to work. Lyra wanted to protest, but exhaustion was a physical weight dragging her under. She lay down, just for a moment, just to rest her eyes. She was asleep before the healer left the room. The dream came hard and fast. She was back in the compound, wearing the engagement dress, Declan's hand possessive on her waist. But when she looked up, his face had changed, became something monstrous, all teeth and malice. Did you really think you could escape? He asked, voice echoing. You're mine. You were always mine. She tried to run, but the dress tangled around her legs, dragging her down. The floor opened beneath her feet, and she was falling. Lyra, wake up! She jerked awake, gasping. The healer stood beside the bed, expression grave. They're back, he said simply. Lyra was on her feet instantly, ignoring the protest of her muscles. Is he alive? Barely. Marcus got to him just in time. The healer gestured toward the door. He's in the medical house, but you should know he's in bad shape. Lost a lot of blood. Infection's setting in. The next few hours will tell us if he makes it. Lyra didn't wait for more. She pushed past him and ran. The medical house was the largest building in the settlement, designed for exactly this kind of emergency. She found Cade in a room at the back, lying on a cot surrounded by healers working with quiet urgency. He looked dead. His skin was gray, his breathing shallow and irregular. The wound in his side had been cleaned and packed, but blood still seeped through the bandages. Let me see him, Lyra said. One of the healers, a young woman with exhaustion written across her face, looked up. Are you family? I'm the reason he's alive. Lyra's voice was steady. So yes, I'm family. The healer nodded and stepped aside. Lyra moved to Cade's side, taking his hand. It was cold. Too cold. Cade, she whispered. I'm here. I came back. Like I promised. No response. His eyes didn't even flicker. We've done what we can, the young healer said quietly. The rest is up to him. His body, his will to survive. He'll make it. Lyra's grip tightened. He promised me he would. Then we hope he keeps his promises. The healer touched her shoulder briefly. You can stay. Talk to him. Sometimes they hear us, even when they can't respond. The healers filed out, giving them privacy. Lyra pulled a chair close to the bed and settled in. You better not die on me, she said, voice low and fierce. Not after everything we've been through. Not after I ran for 2 days straight to get you help. Silence. Just the rasp of his breathing. I figured it out, the whole thing. Lyra brushed hair from his forehead. Declan orchestrated everything. The kidnapping, the bounty, all of it. He wanted me gone without the political fallout of breaking the alliance himself. Hire someone to snatch me, arrange for bounty hunters to finish the job, then play the grieving fiancé. Clean. Efficient. She laughed, bitter. He probably didn't count on his hired tracker developing a conscience, or his bride learning to fight back. More silence. But was his breathing a little stronger, or was she imagining it? When you wake up, and you will wake up, we're going to make him pay. For this, for everything. Lyra's voice dropped. I'm not the same person he tried to dispose of. You showed me that. Showed me I'm capable of surviving things I never thought possible. She stayed there through the night, talking when she had words, sitting in silence when she didn't. The healers came and went, checking vitals, changing bandages. Each time they shook their heads. No change. Still critical. Dawn came gray and cold. Lyra was half asleep in her chair when she felt it, The slightest pressure on her hand. Her eyes snapped open. Cade's fingers had twitched, just barely, but it was movement. Cade? She leaned closer. Can you hear me? His eyelids fluttered, opened halfway. His gaze was unfocused, confused. Hey, Lyra said, trying to keep her voice steady. Welcome back. Lyra? The word came out as barely more than a breath. You're alive. So are you, barely, but yeah. She wiped at her eyes angrily. You scared the hell out of me. Sorry. A pause. The hunters? Dead. All of them, eventually. Marcus's team cleaned up what was left. Lyra squeezed his hand. We won. Cade's eyes drifted closed again, but his grip on her hand remained. We. Lyra blinked back tears. Now rest. You've got healing to do. He slipped back under, but this time it was true sleep. Not the deathly stillness from before. The healers confirmed it when they returned. Vitals stronger, breathing steadier. He was turning the corner. He'll need weeks to fully recover, the head healer cautioned. That wound was serious, but he's past the worst of it. Lyra nodded, relief flooding through her. Thank you. All of you. Thank Marcus. She's the one who got him here alive. The healer smiled slightly, though I suspect having you to come back to helped. Gave him something to fight for. After they left, Lyra settled back in her chair. Exhaustion was pulling at her again, but she didn't dare sleep. Not yet. Not until she was sure. But her body had other ideas. Within minutes, she was unconscious, hands still locked around Cade's. 3 days later, Cade was awake and arguing with the healers. I can walk, he insisted, trying to sit up and immediately going pale with pain. Lying down, you mean? The young healer, her name was Sarah, pushed him back firmly. That wound opens again and all our work was for nothing. I've had worse. I doubt that. Sarah checked his bandages, nodding in satisfaction. Another week before we even discuss you getting out of that bed, so settle in. Cade muttered something uncomplimentary under his breath. Sarah ignored him with the ease of someone who'd dealt with difficult patients before. Lyra watched from the doorway, fighting a smile. This was the Cade she'd come to know, stubborn, independent to a fault, terrible at accepting help. Stop terrorizing the healers, she said, entering the room. Cade's expression shifted when he saw her, became something softer. You look better. Less like you've been dragged through hell. Funny, I was going to say the same about you. Lyra took her usual seat beside the bed. Though you're still pretty rough. Give me a week, I'll be good as new. Sarah says 3 weeks minimum. Sarah's being overly cautious. Sarah's trying to keep you alive, you idiot. Lyra's voice sharpened. So shut up and let her do her job. Cade blinked, startled by the vehemence. Then he laughed, actually laughed, before pain cut it short. All right, point made. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Cade's expression grew serious. We need to talk, he said, about what happens next. Lyra had been dreading this conversation. I know. The contract, the binding released when I nearly died. I felt it break, which means I'm no longer obligated to deliver you anywhere. Cade met her eyes. You're free. Can go wherever you want. And you? Same. No more curse, no more deadline. I can disappear, start fresh somewhere. He paused. That was always the plan. Get the money, vanish, leave all this behind. Is that what you want? The question hung between them. Cade was quiet for a long time. A month ago, yeah. That was all I wanted. Freedom from contracts, from obligations, from caring about anything or anyone. His voice went rough. But things change, people change. What changed? You. Simple. Direct. You changed everything. Lyra's breath caught. Cade, let me finish. He struggled to sit up slightly, wincing. I've spent 15 years running from connections. Convinced myself that caring was weakness, that being alone was the only way to survive. And then I kidnapped this stubborn, fierce woman who refused to break no matter what the mountain threw at her. I broke plenty, Lyra said quietly. You just didn't see it. Maybe. But you put yourself back together every time, got up, kept fighting. Cade's hand found hers. You made me remember that survival isn't the same as living. That maybe caring about something is worth the risk. So what are you saying? I'm saying I'm done running, done pretending I don't need anyone. His grip tightened. I'm saying that if you'll have me, I'd like to stick around. See where this goes. Lyra felt tears threatening again. You realize I come with complications, right? Declan's still out there. The packs will come looking eventually. This isn't over. Good. Cade's smile was sharp, dangerous. Because I've got a few things to say to your ex-fiancé about contract law and basic human decency. He'll try to kill you. He can try. No fear in his voice, just certainty. But I'm harder to kill than he thinks, and I won't be alone. No, Lyra agreed. You won't. The moment stretched, heavy with possibility. Then Sarah bustled back in, breaking the spell. Enough excitement, she announced. Patient needs rest, and so do you. She pointed at Lyra. Out. Come back in a few hours. Lyra stood reluctantly. I'll be back. I know, Cade said. His eyes held promises neither of them was ready to voice yet. I'll be here. As Lyra left the medical house, she found Marcus waiting outside. Got a minute? The tracker asked. Sure. They walked to the edge of the settlement where the mountains rose in jagged silhouettes against the sky. Marcus pulled out a pipe, lit it, took a long draw. So, she said finally, you planning to go back? Lyra knew exactly what she meant. Back to the compound. Back to her old life. Back to playing the political games she'd been raised for. Eventually, she said, but not as the person I was. Good. That person would have gotten you killed. Marcus exhaled smoke. The one standing here now, she's got a chance. How much do you know about what happened? Enough. Word travels fast in the mountains. Alpha Thorn's bride to be kidnapped, massive bounty offered, bodies turning up all over the high country. Marcus's eyes were sharp. People are talking, asking questions. Your fiancé's story about rogues isn't holding up. He orchestrated the whole thing, Lyra said. Hired Cade to kidnap me, arranged for bounty hunters to finish the job, planned to blame it on territorial disputes. Figured as much. Thorn's ambitious, and you were a complication he didn't want to manage. Marcus tapped ash from her pipe. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Make him pay. The words came out harder than Lyra intended. For this? For treating me like disposable property. For every other person, he's hurt climbing to power. Revenge is messy, gets people killed. This isn't revenge, it's justice. Lyra turned to face Marcus fully. And I'm going to need help. Can't take down an alpha alone. Marcus smiled, slow, predatory. Now you're talking. What do you need? Information first. Who else has Thorn screwed over? Who would stand against him if they had a reason? Long list. He's made enemies consolidating territory. Smaller packs absorbed, rivals eliminated, allies betrayed when they became inconvenient. Marcus's expression was thoughtful. But they're scattered. No coordination. Everyone's too afraid to move first. Then I'll move first. Give them something to rally behind. You realize this is suicide if it goes wrong. Thorn has an army. You have, what, a half-dead tracker and a bunch of theoretical allies? I have the truth. And I have nothing left to lose. Lyra's voice was steady. Thorn tried to kill me. He failed. Now I'm coming back to burn his empire down. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right. I'm in. But we do this smart. No running in half-cocked. Agreed. We planned carefully, moved deliberately. Lyra felt something settling into place, purpose, direction, the first time since her abduction, that she knew exactly what she needed to do. How long until Cade can travel? 3 weeks, maybe. Sarah knows her business. Then we have 3 weeks to build a case, gather allies, and prepare for war. War. Marcus tested the word. Yeah, that's what this'll be. You ready for that? Lyra thought about everything she'd survived. The abduction, the mountains, the fights, the near-death experiences. Thought about the deer she'd killed, the hunters she'd stabbed, the choices she'd made. I'm ready, she said. The question is whether Declan Thorn is ready for what's coming. The 3 weeks passed in a blur of planning and preparation. Cade healed faster than Sarah predicted. driven by the same stubborn refusal to slow down that had carried him through 15 years alone in the wilderness. By week 2, he was walking. By week 3, he was training again, carefully, but with increasing intensity. Marcus proved invaluable. She had contacts throughout the mountain territories, knew which packs harbored grudges against Thorn, which rogues might be persuaded to join a cause. She sent messages, called in favors, laid groundwork. Lyra spent the time learning, combat training with Marcus's people, politics and strategy sessions planning their approach. And in the quiet moments, sitting with Cade, building something neither of them quite knew how to name yet. "You don't have to do this," Cade said one evening. They were sitting on a ridge overlooking the settlement, watching the sun set. "You could stay here, start over." Thorn would eventually give up searching. He'd never give up. I'm a loose end, and he doesn't tolerate those. Lyra leaned against his shoulder, careful of his healing wound. "Besides, this isn't just about me anymore. It's about everyone he's hurt, everyone he'll hurt if someone doesn't stop him." "When did you become a revolutionary?" "When the alternative was being a victim." She turned to look at him. "You helped with that, you know. Showed me I could survive things I never thought possible." "You did that yourself. I just provided the scenery." "Don't sell yourself short. You—" Lyra paused, searching for words. "You saw something in me before I could see it myself. Treated me like I was strong, even when I felt weak. That mattered." Cade was quiet for a moment, then, "I see it now too. You're terrifying. Thorn has no idea what's coming for him." "Good. Let's keep it that way." The final piece fell into place 2 days before they were set to leave. A runner arrived from the Eastern Territories, a young wolf with news that made Marcus smile darkly. "3 packs are willing to stand with you," she told Lyra. "Smaller groups, but experienced fighters. They want Thorn gone as much as you do." "What convinced them?" "Your story. The fact that an alpha was willing to murder his own bride for political convenience. It crossed a line. Reminded them that they could be next if Thorn keeps expanding. So they're motivated by self-interest." "All alliances are," Marcus said pragmatically. "The question is whether you can turn that into something more. Give them a reason to believe in the cause, not just the strategy." Lyra nodded slowly. She'd been thinking about this, about what she represented to the scattered wolves who'd suffered under Thorn's consolidation of power. "I'm proof he can be beaten," she said. "I survived his attempt to kill me. That alone challenges the narrative he's built, that he's inevitable, unstoppable. If I can stand against him, maybe others can too." "Exactly." Marcus's expression was approving. "You're not just fighting for revenge, you're offering hope. Don't underestimate how powerful that is." 2 days later, they left the settlement. Lyra, Cade, Marcus, and 10 of her best fighters. Not an army, but enough to make a statement. The journey back took 5 days. They moved deliberately, stopping at settlements along the way to spread word, gather more allies. By the time they reached the borderlands of Thorn's territory, their group had swelled to nearly 40. "Last chance to turn back," Cade said quietly. They were camped a day's march from the compound. Tomorrow, they would enter Thorn's lands. Tomorrow, everything would change. "No turning back," Lyra said. "Not now. He'll have heard we're coming. We'll be ready." "Good. I want him to know. Want him to spend tonight wondering what I've become." She checked her weapons, knife, short sword, the bow Cade had taught her to use. "Let him be afraid for once." Cade smiled. "You've changed." "You say that like it's a bad thing." "Not bad. Just different from the woman I kidnapped 3 months ago. That woman would have died in the mountains." Lyra met his eyes. "This one survived, and she's done being afraid." That night, Lyra barely slept. She kept thinking about the compound, about Declan, about the moment she'd walk back into that place as something other than a victim. When dawn came gray and cold, she was ready. They approached the compound from the south, making no attempt at stealth. Lyra wanted Thorn to see them coming, wanted him to know she'd survived, gathered allies, come back for reckoning. The gates opened when they were still 100 yards away. A delegation emerged, Thorn's enforcers, along with her father. Jonathan Vance looked like he'd aged a decade. His face was haggard, his shoulders slumped. When he saw Lyra, something crumbled in his expression. "You're alive," he breathed. "No thanks to you." Lyra's voice was cold. "You sold me to a monster. Did you know what he planned?" No. I thought, her father seemed to struggle for words. The alliance was necessary for the pack's survival. For your political survival, you mean? Lyra dismounted, facing him directly. You handed me over without asking what I wanted, what I needed, treated me like a bargaining chip. I did what I had to do. You did what was easy. There's a difference. She gestured to the compound. Where is he? Where's Thorn? Waiting inside. He wants to negotiate. Lyra laughed, harsh, humorless. There's nothing to negotiate. I'm not here for talks. I'm here for justice. Her father flinched. Lyra, please, don't do this. Whatever happened out there, whatever Thorn did, we can find another way. There is no other way. He tried to have me killed, hired a tracker to kidnap me, arranged for bounty hunters to finish the job. She moved closer, voice dropping. Did you know about any of that, Father? Or were you too busy celebrating the alliance to care what happened to your daughter? I didn't know, I swear. It doesn't matter, because you didn't ask. Didn't check. Didn't care enough to make sure I was safe. Lyra felt something final settling into place. I'm not your daughter anymore. That relationship died in the mountains. She walked past him without waiting for a response. Cade and Marcus fell in beside her, with the rest of their group following. The enforcers parted, uncertain. Inside the compound, everything looked exactly as Lyra remembered. Stone and steel, built to intimidate. But it didn't frighten her anymore. She'd survived worse. Thorn waited in the great hall, seated at the high table like this was just another negotiation, but Lyra could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes tracked their group. He was nervous. Good. Lyra Vance. His voice was controlled, pleasant. I'm relieved to see you alive. We feared the worst when you disappeared. Cut the performance, Lyra said. We both know you orchestrated everything. I have no idea what you're talking about. Then let me clarify. Lyra moved closer, counting on Marcus and Cade to watch her back. You hired a tracker named Cade Rourke to kidnap me, arranged for bounty hunters to eliminate me in the mountains, all to avoid the political messiness of breaking our alliance while making yourself look like the victim. Thorn's expression didn't flicker. Interesting story. Do you have proof? I have testimony. Cade will confirm the contract. Marcus has statements from the bounty hunters' associates. Lyra's voice was steady. But more than that, I have logic. Who else benefits from my death? Who gains from destabilizing the Vance pack while avoiding responsibility? Speculation isn't evidence. Maybe not in a court, but we're not in a court. Lyra gestured to the wolves gathered behind her. We're in the wild territories where justice is decided differently. And these people, they're all here because they've suffered under your rule. Packs absorbed, rivals eliminated, allies betrayed. Murmurs of agreement rippled through her group. Thorn's enforcers shifted uneasily. You've been challenged before, Lyra continued, always won through superior force or political maneuvering. But I'm offering something different. Single combat, you and me. Winner takes the truth. The hall went silent. Thorn stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You're challenging me? A trained alpha warrior? He laughed. You'd die in seconds. Maybe. But you're afraid to find out. Lyra smiled coldly. Because if you refuse, everyone here knows what it means. That you're scared of the woman you tried to murder. That your power is built on fear, not strength. Thorn's jaw clenched. She'd trapped him. Accept the challenge and risk losing, or refuse and look weak. Fine, he said finally. Single combat. But when I kill you, your allies disperse. No revenge, no retaliation. Agreed? Agreed. And when I win, you confess everything. Then you leave these territories and never come back. Deal. Thorn stood, already reaching for weapons. Let's end this. They cleared the hall, creating a circle for the fight. Lyra checked her weapons one last time. She wasn't delusional. Thorn was bigger, stronger, more experienced. The odds were against her. But she'd survived impossible odds before. Cade caught her arm as she moved toward the circle. You don't have to do this. We can handle him together. Yes, I do. This is personal. Lyra squeezed his hand. But if I fall, you won't. If I do, finish it. Don't let him win. Cade's expression was fierce. I won't have to, because you're going to survive this like you've survived everything else. Lyra nodded and stepped into the circle. Thorn was already there, stripped down to fighting leathers, weapons ready. He looked confident, amused even. That was his first mistake. The fight began without ceremony. Thorn attacked immediately, using his size advantage to drive her back. But Lyra had learned from the mountains, size didn't matter if you were faster, smarter. She dodged, rolled, stayed out of reach. Let him exhaust himself with aggressive strikes while she waited for openings. "Stand still," Thorn growled, frustration creeping in. "Why? So you can kill me easier?" Lyra darted in, her blade finding a gap in his guard. Not a fatal wound, but enough to draw blood. "You're going to have to work for it." The crowd was murmuring now. Thorn was supposed to dominate, but Lyra was holding her own. He changed tactics, going defensive, trying to wear her down. But Lyra had run through mountain blizzards for days, fought bounty hunters, killed when necessary. Her endurance had been forged in conditions Thorn couldn't imagine. The fight stretched on. 10 minutes, 15. Both of them were bleeding now, tired. But Lyra could see it in Thorn's eyes. He was starting to doubt. That was when she struck. She feinted left, then dove right, her blade finding the weak point in his armor she'd been watching for. The strike was clean, deep, precise. Thorn staggered, his weapon clattered to the ground. Lyra pressed her blade to his throat. Yield. For a moment she thought he might refuse, might force her to finish it. Then his shoulders sagged. "I yield." The hall erupted, some in shock, some in approval. Lyra kept her blade steady. "Confess," she said quietly. "Tell them what you did." Thorn's eyes burned with hatred, but he spoke. "I hired the tracker, arranged the bounty. Wanted her dead to avoid the alliance." "Why?" "Because she was a complication I didn't need. A political burden." His voice was bitter. "Happy now?" "Getting there." Lyra removed the blade, stepping back. "You have until sunrise to leave these territories. If you're still here after that, my allies will hunt you down. Understand?" Thorn didn't answer, just gathered his weapons and walked out, surrounded by the few enforcers still loyal to him. As he left, Lyra felt something release in her chest. The weight she'd been carrying since the engagement announcement. The fear, the powerlessness, the feeling of being trapped. It was gone. She turned to face the assembled wolves. Her father was there looking lost. Marcus wore an expression of fierce pride. And Cade? Cade was smiling, like she'd just proven everything he'd ever believed about her. "The Thorn regime is over," Lyra announced. Her voice carried clearly through the hall. "From this moment forward, these territories operate under new leadership. Democratic councils instead of alpha rule. Alliances built on mutual respect, not fear." Murmurs spread through the crowd, some approving, some uncertain. "I know this is different," Lyra continued. "Scary even. We've lived under strong-arm rule for so long, it's hard to imagine another way. But I've learned something out in those mountains. Survival isn't about who's strongest or most ruthless. It's about adapting, cooperating, choosing courage over fear." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I'm not asking you to follow me blindly. I'm asking you to build something new together, where strength is measured by what we create, not what we destroy. Where alliances are partnerships, not submissions. Where no one, not even an alpha's bride, is treated as disposable property." The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. Then someone in the back started clapping. Others joined. Within moments, the hall was filled with applause. Lyra looked at Cade, who'd moved to stand beside her. "Think it'll work?" "Yeah," he said. "I do. Because you'll make it work. That's who you are now." "Who we are," Lyra corrected. "I can't do this alone." "Good thing you're not alone anymore." Cade's hand found hers. "We've got a whole pack of people who believe in what you're building." And looking around the hall, at Marcus grinning fiercely, at the wolves who'd followed her into battle, at her father slowly beginning to understand what she'd become, Lyra felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. 1. 3 months later, Lyra stood on the same ridge where Cade had first taught her to track. The settlement below had grown, new buildings rising to accommodate the influx of wolves choosing to join the new order. The Democratic Council was functioning, messy but effective. Thorn had fled to the far western territories and hadn't been heard from since. Alliances were being forged with neighboring pacts, built on cooperation rather than conquest. It wasn't perfect. There were disputes, disagreements, moments when the old ways threatened to resurface, but they were building something real, something lasting. Kate appeared beside her, moving with the silent grace she'd come to associate with him. His wound had healed cleanly, leaving only a scar, one more mark on a body that told the story of survival. "Council's asking for you," he said. "Dispute about territory boundaries. They can handle it without me for an hour." Lyra didn't take her eyes from the view. "I need to think. About? Everything. What we've built, what comes next." She glanced at him. "What we are." Cade smiled. "What do you think we are?" "Partners, allies. Maybe something more, if we're brave enough." Lyra turned to face him fully. "I never thanked you properly. For everything. For seeing who I could become before I could see it myself. You did the hard part. I just provided the circumstances." He moved closer. "Besides, you saved my life too. Pretty sure that makes us even. Is that how you're keeping score?" "I don't keep score anymore. Learned that lesson." Cade's expression grew serious. "I spent 15 years running from everything that mattered. Convinced myself that caring was weakness. Then you came along and proved me wrong about pretty much everything. So what now? Now I stop running. Stop pretending I don't need anyone. Stay here. Help build what you're creating." He paused. "If you'll have me." "Are you asking to join my pack, Tracker?" "I'm asking to join your life. However that looks." Lyra felt tears threatening. Happy ones this time. "Yeah, I think I'd like that." They stood together, watching the sun set over the mountains that had nearly killed them both. The same mountains that had forged them into people capable of surviving anything. In the distance, a wolf howled, wild and free, but not alone. Other voices joined, creating a chorus that echoed through the valley. Lyra understood that sound in a way she never had before. It wasn't loneliness. It was connection. Calling out and knowing someone would answer. "You know what the best part is?" she said quietly. "What?" "We get to choose what comes next. No contracts binding us. No obligations except the ones we accept. Just possibility." Cade's arm slipped around her waist. "What do you choose?" Lyra leaned into his warmth, feeling the solid reality of him beside her. Thinking about councils and alliances, and the hard work of building something new. Thinking about the scars they both carried, and the strength that came from surviving together. "I choose this," she said finally. "All of it. The struggle, the building, the hope. And you, if you're choosing it too." "Every day," Cade promised. "For as long as you'll have me." They turned and walked back down to the settlement together. Not captor and captive. Not predator and prey. Just two people who'd survived the impossible and chosen each other in spite of every reason not to. The mountains rose behind them, silent witnesses to everything they'd overcome. And ahead, the settlement lights flickered to life, warm and welcoming. Somewhere between the abduction and this moment, between the woman Lyra had been forced to be and the person she'd chosen to become, something fundamental had shifted. She'd learned that strength wasn't about power over others. It was about the courage to keep fighting when everything said to quit. About choosing connection even when isolation felt safer. About building instead of destroying. And she'd learned that sometimes the person who kidnaps you in the night can become the one who helps you find yourself in the dark. The irony wasn't lost on her, but standing there with Cade beside her and a future full of possibility ahead, Lyra couldn't bring herself to regret a single brutal moment that had brought her here. This was freedom. Real freedom. Not the kind granted by absence of chains, but the kind earned through survival, choice, and the willingness to become someone new. And that was worth everything it had cost.